And there's no way I click the exact same thing.
Right.
There's no way. It's impossible. But my personality type for the that is called the Rainmaker.
I remember that, yes, because I think Rainmaker suits you well.
It makes sense, like, now that I've kind of understood it, and in an environment where I feel like, I'm doing the work I'm meant to do really well, it makes more sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, hey, now that we're 8 minutes in, welcome to Sunday
Plus, everybody.
We talk about ourselves because that's what you want to hear.
That's
right?
exactly what everybody wants to listen to.
So the church robe thing yesterday, or 2 days ago now. In fact, April Fools.
Yeah, April Fools to you as well. This is actually Tuesday Plus. That's the April Fools. Yeah. Kevin just came in and asked me if I was going to do like a April Fools newsletter of any sort, and it's just like, I think I'm going to do, well, if you're reading this, I'm sorry you missed the rapture, and so did I.
That's just a slight likelihood that one person will take that seriously.
Right.
You can't do that.
I don't think I can do that.
Somebody's gonna be like, no.
I have to figure something else out that's just like biblically wacko or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I already got this morning. There's a guy that I watch that he does camera news updates like pretty much every week, and he always does one on April 1st. And they're the exact same format as any of his others. And I was very excited about one of the cameras that he was talking about. I was like, yes, finally. And everything in my brain should have been like, it's April 1st, dum-dum. Like, this isn't real. But I already got this morning.
So last year, TCU did an entire marketing campaign around switching mascots from the Horned Frogs to the Squirrels, and had the chancellor going around the campus pointing out these, if you see this squirrel here is one of the reasons it's just a hallmark and benchmark of who we are as a campus, and even had a whole diagram of a squirrel's body and the core values that it attributed with the fuzziness and whatever. It was really, really well done.
That's somebody that's got some good foresight to really mess with an entire campus and all of. If anybody alumni got hold of the news story, they're like, what are they doing?
Right.
Because for whatever reason, so when I was at Irving Bible Church, they pulled an April Fool's thing. They were talking about redoing our logo.
Okay.
And I remember me and my buddy Colin, who worked there, we were like, what are they talking? And they sent it out, and it was so bad. And they had brought in this marketing team to talk with us, and they were going to go around and pull things. And they even came into a staff meeting and were taking notes. And then we get this thing. It looked like either a wheel, and they had all these explanations, each of the circles within the wheel represent, and we were like, what? This is so stupid. And they were asking for the comms director was sending an email out and asking for feedback, and nobody picked up on the fact that it was April 1st.
That's funny.
Because they had been prefacing it for so long. And so we're just like, no, there's no way. Why? What is he seeing? This is terrible. And then finally somebody pointed out on the group chat, anybody else catch that it's April 1st? And we're like, oh.
Well, I don't know if Casey Wiley listens to this, but if you're not following Casey or Melissa on Facebook, Casey is the king of April Fools in his house. Goes all out in his house to do stuff to his kids, his wife. You gotta go follow, because they'll do a recap after today.
Oh my gosh.
And every year it is just some next level, thought about for months kind of stuff. It is he's amazing.
I always feel like I should be that kind of person. But then when I get home, I'm often just I'm tired.
Well, that's what Lindsay asked me on the way home, driving back from home. And she goes, do you have any April Fool's Day things planned for the girls? And I was like, no. They're going to be in school. I'm going to be at work. Who knows? Yeah, it'll be fine. So anyway, church robe. You were talking about church robes.
Okay,
yes.
So the kid was is that a dress?
This is the third time I've had a kid ask me why I'm wearing a dress. And to explain to a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old what a robe is about is like, it's just a fancy dress.
So you have like your classic, the ones that you normally wear. That's more like, I guess, like a choir robe, or
the university is the big and bulky is the university robes. Yeah,
university robes minus the mortarboard and plus a stall. Is there any significance behind those stalls? Is there like a difference with this stall versus this stall versus?
So the stalls are like colors. So I mean, you match like the liturgical season. So if it's Pentecost, you wear
Purple,
red.
green,
Easter, it's white. Purple for Lent. So that's the significance. The general significance is it's like the yoke of an oxen. Like you are taking on the burden of responsibility, is the burden of authority. That's behind the stole.
Yeah, but Jesus' yoke is easy and his burden is light.
Right. Well,
or did I say that backward?
My yoke is light and my burden is easy, but
I said it backward.
Altogether, I like being a pastor, so I suppose it's not, that terrible.
And so, because I always think of things like looking at the Catholic cardinals that that's all they wear pretty much.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And it's easy in the morning. You don't really have to decide what you're going to wear that day. You're just like, let me see, black or black.
Or if you get to be a cardinal, you get a red,
or
right?
Red, yeah.
Or red or a white one.
And so, is there one you prefer?
I like my black slim robe. It's funny because the first robe I ever had, I went up to Topeka and was, as a youth minister, was not like commissioned or ordained in any level. But the senior pastor was basically took me under his wing as like, well, yeah, it's my job to mentor you in all of this. And first time I got to preach, he says, you're going to need a robe and you're going to wear a stole. I was like, well, no, you're not supposed to do that till you get ordained. He goes, yeah, but people need to respect you. So you're going to wear a stole. So fortunately,
is there a type of stole that you're allowed to wear before you're ordained?
So that was my mother-in-law had got me a seminary graduation present. That was a stole. And then I went on a mission trip to Honduras where they got me like a hand knitted stole from a vendor in Honduras.
So you had a couple of them.
So I had two. And then a retiring Baptist pastor from Topeka, First Baptist Topeka, somehow or another we met and struck up a friendship, and he gave me the black big university robe. So I wore that, but then I got down here, and so women had started. Women had started getting more of a feminine, form-fitting robe than the big boxy ones. Well, I moved down, and Edlin Calley was the first one I saw who had it looked like Keanu Reeves from The Matrix kind of robe, and I thought that's way better.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those, and every time I see it, I'm like, that's pretty legit.
Yeah, so I went ahead and
Does yours have one of those rope belts?
So I have another one that's like a off-color white, looks like a monk's robe, and it has the rope belt. I've worn it exactly like 3 times. The first time I wore it, everyone made fun of it.
Yeah, Daniel Humbert has one of those, and he we did a series at Treach where it was all about like influencers and whatnot, and we were mimicking what were like the pop TikTok trends of that day, and one of them was that thing where you like throw your hand across the camera and then you're wearing something else or cross whatever, and one of the last things he wore was that. It was basically, it looked like a dress kind of thing, but it was super classic. Like it had a black rope belt that was like the threading of the rope was really cool, and it was unthreading at the end in just the right way.
Nice.
And it fit him really well. I was like, that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. Like I'd be a little weirded out if we were at the contemporary worship and like you just walk up sporting that if it wasn't part of like a shtick, so to speak, to be like, guess what we're doing today? But like, like a Good Friday worship service or something like that, or a Maundy Thursday where everything is a little more classic and traditional and you're leaning into some of those elements, I'd be like, all right, that fits. That's cool.
I think I'm going to go get one with a robe or with a hood so I can be like a complete monastic person. I'm going to walk in on Maundy Thursday with it like, you can barely see it, like Assassin's Creed
I was going to say Assassin's Creed. Yeah. Our brains were in the same spot. I feel like the thing about that, though, is you either have to have very specific shoes or you go barefoot.
I think it's got to be barefoot or sandals on some level.
You've got to have like very non-branded sandals that are like that look like they were made a couple hundred years ago, or just go barefoot, man.
I love this the conversation we're having about the vestments we put on to make ourselves more holy. But that also
it's a mindset, like
It is a
anything
mindset,
else.
yeah.
When you wear certain things, you feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And like this morning, you don't think about it because it's happening so fast in your brain. But I was debating like, ooh, do I want to go my kind of charcoal gray ripped jeans or my black ripped jeans? Because I decided I'm going to go with this classic dark stylized camo shirt. And then I was like, ooh, let me get some bold shoes that pop. That
Nice.
just will not distract too much, but they will if you're looking at it. Like, so everything I distinctly remember. And then I remember I was like, oh, I've got green. Let me get my frog socks because
Nice.
they're also green. So everything I do is intentional because it made me feel like I was cohesive at the end of
There
the
you
day
go.
before I walk out the door. And yet that's probably the last I'm going to think about it until I'm at home and I'm like, get these shoes and socks off of my
Right.
feet.
Yeah. So where's the pajamas at?
Yeah. Well, I do tracksuits now.
Okay.
I've got like
Equally
these,
comfortable.
oh, I love like a end of the day tracksuit.
Yeah.
It's a good vibe because it's not as like fluffy and loose as like pajamas or whatever. But I also feel like if I needed to run to the store or something, I wouldn't feel very stupid. I'm like, oh, you're wearing a tracksuit.
You're not going to end up on the internet somewhere or another.
Yeah.
It's like
Versus,
the guy in the weird pajamas.
oh, that guy's wearing SpongeBob pajamas. What's going on here? Why are you in a public place?
That's, well,
But is very classic. So yes,
Yeah.
the many different types of robes that we have, and so with many different types, you also mentioned different types of prayer. Mm-hmm. And so as we've been going through this this prayer series, do you think that there are very like strictly defined types of prayer, or is it kind of just what is your intention?
I think it's what is your intention. I guess on the same line as the fashion commentary around intentionality, like I'm somebody who, I don't know if I do it more in conversation than specific prayer, but like I still think confession is a really important thing.
Of course.
And so I think there is a uniqueness to a prayer that is confessing versus a prayer that is asking for something or...
Well, yeah, even in the Book of Discipline, the Methodist Book of Discipline, there are prayers of confession.
Yeah, for
there
sure.
There are statements of confession. And we do that still as part of traditional communion.
Right.
Confession and pardon.
Well, in the public prayer that is, like the pastor or worship leader, somebody on behalf of everybody, we often throw in elements of confession, recognizing we haven't always been great neighbors. So I think there are intentional prayers, but I remember,
We have not done your will. We have broken your love.
That's right.
We have rebelled against your love. We have not loved our neighbors. We have not heard the cry of the needy.
Look at this. The whole great Thanksgiving. You're ready to go.
Dude, man, I've been doing it monthly since I have memory.
A fetus. Yeah.
Like I just have so many memories of being a tiny human and just these words just getting ingrained in my brain. So, the confession element though has become less popular to talk about because when most people think confession, you think of like a Catholic church where you're going into a confession booth and you're talking to Father, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, and then you're talking to this person behind the woven window, and
kind of a cloudy figure behind the window, yeah.
And so that feels kind of archaic to the modern churchgoer.
And I think too, with the church, often rightfully so, getting branded as just the space of judgments where you're going to walk in and everyone's going to tell you you're a bad person, or
I mean, you are a bad person.
You are a bad person, obviously. But just even the subtle microaggressions of church culture sometimes that just suggest that we're all evil. So with that stereotype, the idea of, well, hey, we're going to also, it's important for you to admit that you're evil is, I think, a turnoff. And so churches have stopped leaning into that because they don't want to be branded or seen as
they lean
those
into
negative spaces.
the gospel that is, because Jesus died and rose again,
Right.
You don't have to worry about it.
You don't have to worry about that, which isn't our
But
Protestant.
then simultaneously, but also don't forget.
That's right. That is the funny thing about certain brands of denominations is like, salvation is offered without price, grace is free, but let's not forget how bad of people we are.
Yeah, I always thought the big two for me growing up, because Catholic always felt very ritualistic and it almost like going. I've been to plenty of Catholic churches and there was kind of a somber nature, and I was like, this doesn't feel very joyful.
Yeah.
So I always thought
Until you get to the reception afterwards.
The two big ones for me growing up, for my friend group, was either Methodist or Baptist. And so Methodist was grace is free, grace is given, everything is grace centered. And Baptists are like, you might be going to hell.
And that's
what are you gonna do about that?
That's said at the funeral. Yeah. The first funeral I ever went to that was a non-United Methodist funeral was probably by the time I was working in Kansas. We had a family who lost. It was a family from our church, and her boyfriend got killed in a car accident heading back to college. It was really tragic, and it was the first funeral I went to that was like full praise band, like interesting service. The whole thing was about good news, salvation, whatever. But at the very end was when he brought out the altar call of, like, now, are you next? Are you the one who's going to die next?
Oh.
And are you going to, and I was sitting there thinking, like, am I?
Am I next?
Am I, like, I left feeling so fearful and was like, hold on, that was not the resurrection story that we were, like, supposed to feel. But I want to get back, when you were mentioning, like, specific prayers versus just kind of all the same.
Yeah.
There was a woman who used to drop by here, and she obviously comes from a different, and there was a whole back scenario that I won't get into that's really interesting about her, but she would always come in and say, I need you to pray these prayers. And she would like
you've mentioned this to me
she's
before.
like, I need deliverance prayers, intercession prayers, breaking chains prayers, forgiveness prayers. And she would go through a list of like 15 different types of prayers. So I'm kind of registering, okay, this is what's going on. She's feeling trapped. Okay. And like I'd register the concept. So then I would pray over her. And it would be a 3 to 4 minute prayer where I'm just asking God.
Oh my gosh, she was expecting like 20 minutes.
Well, it was like I'd get done with one and she'd go, okay, the next one. I'd say, well, actually, we did everything. And she goes, no, you didn't do this. And like she wanted like 15 different prayers along the lines of forgiveness of sins, breaking of chains, exorcism. I mean, just all sorts of stuff.
I mean, actively asking for exorcism. That's like, I'm sorry, do you have a demon in you right now? What is happening?
So that's the backstory that we need probably another podcast for, is she did believe that she was possessed by Satan.
Oh, wow. I do remember you telling me that.
It's a whole story. And
so this dogmatic approach to prayer almost feels like, for me personally, it feels like you're putting prayer in a box, and if you don't do it right, then it doesn't count.
Yeah, that's I 100% agree. And that was part of the, like, I hate to say I was frustrated while I was trying to pray for somebody, but she would literally, like, I'd say amen, and she would say amen, and then she'd say, okay, next one. And I was like, well, no, we already prayed for that. And she would say, do it again. And it was like, well, we haven't done it according to the Boy Scout handbook, so therefore it doesn't get the merit badge that God is expecting. And so for me, I'm much more of I'm going to pray what's on my heart. I'm going to try and be in God's presence when I'm in prayer.
It being genuine seems to be the most important element.
I agree.
Is this what's actually on your heart, or are you just saying words that sound good to the other ears in the room?
Yeah.
And for me, if I am genuinely praying from my heart, that to me is that's as real as it gets. If I forget a word outside of maybe amen, like I don't know how else to better do it.
Well, you brought up the Paul passage about pray unceasingly, and that's a little maybe much. And
Well, I even said that yesterday.
Yeah,
I
you
was
joked
like,
about it.
Seems like an unnecessarily impossible task.
Well, I think it's more of the like bringing your full self consistently into God's presence.
Yes.
There's a theologian named Friedrich Schleiermacher who talks about God consciousness, and through prayer, study, and the
How
Christian
long
life.
did it take you to start saying that name consistently right every time?
Weirdly enough, it was like the first paper I got an A on in systematic theology, so I always remember this one.
Got to get the Schleiermacher.
Schleiermacher, yeah, all those good German theologians that we
Is he
learned.
still alive or is he old
Oh no,
school?
he was probably 1800s, something like
What
that.
was his big? What was his big? Thing.
So
The
his
that
thing
people
was-
referred to him.
His thing was God consciousness, and that
God consciousness.
So that the goal of the Christian life is that our minds kind of, if God's mind is here and our mind is here because of sin separation or whatever, that through prayer and transformation we start to
Move towards
think
him.
more and more naturally like God. So the pray unceasingly he used that a lot in terms of, if we're praying unceasingly, it means we're constantly engaging God throughout the day, not just in direct prayer, but in thought and meditation, to where we eventually start to see the world like God sees the world. Now, his part that people didn't bond on with was, he was like, and that's when you're perfect. And of course, we have Wesley before him and others who are like, yeah, that's really hard. And Wesley talked about being made perfect in, God can make you perfect. You can be perfect in love, but you're not going to be perfect in action.
Yeah, I had a guy approach me outside of a church years ago, and he was kind of throwing that kind of concept at me, that he had reached some sense of, I no longer even feel compulsion to sin, and it has completely left my body, and I think everybody should be like this. And so, and I actually had a place to be. I was leading worship for an event, and just this random dude and his wife and daughter were like 10 feet behind him. He was clearly waiting outside this church to like kind of sniper snag people and just start this conversation. And like, I'm grabbing a guitar out of and a bag out of my car, and he's like just completely intentionally oblivious to what I'm doing because he's got an agenda, and I'm like, okay. And I kind of wanted to like throw down and be like, cool. So since you're now perfect, what Jesus did means nothing now, right?
Exactly.
Is that right? Because you can achieve perfection. And I wanted so badly to throw down on this because it really felt like he hadn't thought this through or didn't really understand a whole lot of things. But I was just like, I genuinely don't have time to do this.
Well, and speaking from experience, his wife and daughter who are behind him are just waiting to go to lunch.
Oh yeah, they were just like, they looked uncomfortable that they were there, and I'm like, this guy needs therapy. Bad.
Right.
Like, I love that you're spending a lot of your energy into connecting with God, my man, but you're doing it in a really weird way.
So several years, this was 2021, I guess, because it was like in the pandemic. It was one of the first concerts. It was the first concert back at Globe Life, and it was Green Day was the headliner. It was also Fall Out Boy and Weezer. And my friends from high school, like they bought tickets like 2 or 3 years before, and it got postponed. And one of them couldn't go anymore, so I got his ticket and ended up. It was a great show. It was awesome.
That's amazing.
But on the way in, there's a street preacher because it's Green Day. It's
Oh yeah, they're definitely from the devil.
They're definitely from the devil. As they talk about mental health and anxiety in all of their music. So anyway, he's street preaching, whatever. So my friend just goes, "I dare you to go talk to that guy." And
brutal,
all
man.
right. So I went, and the guy, he didn't really engage with me. He just kept yelling on the microphone. But I just went up and I just said, "Hey, tell me what you have. Tell me what you're talking about." And he just kept yelling in the microphone about forgiveness of sins or whatever. And I said, "Yeah, that's really great." And we just like kind of led into this conversation where I was like, "So I assume that what you really want for all these people is to have this great unifying experience of grace when they walk into this concert, and they're just going to experience love, like the unifying love that Jesus prays for us for, and that can happen in a concert here." And he really was adamant about that there are very imperfect places, and that these people were making themselves worse by going to this concert. And I am the person who is like, yeah, they probably cussed a few times, but the amount of love that was shared within that concert venue was much more Kingdom of Heaven than the guy shouting at everybody on the street.
There's a somewhat famous video of outside of a Switchfoot concert of all.
Oh,
Yeah.
Christian band, yeah.
Yeah. I loosely.
I guess loosely, yeah.
John
Thematically.
Foreman, I think he's more avoided the notion, but like he said many times, like, I wouldn't refer to us as Christian. We're not like trying to put everything through this very narrow scope of a lens. That seems quite limiting. We're just trying to create music that inspires hope, something to that effect. But there was a guy with a megaphone, bullhorn, whatever, and he had been out like in front of the venue all day of the day of the concert, and then like right before the concert, like he'd just been out there just going, and John Foreman went and bought a case of water for all the people protesting and brought it to them. And the thing that was so interesting about it is that not a single person protesting recognized who he was.
Yeah.
So it was all centered around this agenda of anger and fear and probably hate. Because the guy was completely unresponsive to John Foreman's like attempt to say, "Hey, I brought you some water." The guy was just like sand, hail, just repeating stuff, and like it's actually one of those videos. The more you watch it, the longer you watch it, you're just like, I really, really do not like this guy screaming because he just is so tunnel vision and just anger, and I'm just like, ooh,
it's really uncomfortable.
This is brutal. Like I kind of want to watch somebody just like break that megaphone and get in this dude's face because he doesn't respond to anything else.
Right.
Which is just like, in what world do you think this is the right attitude?
Yeah, I remember being in Times Square waiting in like the discount ticket line for Broadway tickets, and this church, and it was packed, it was raining, and this church came marching, and they just marched around us for like 30 minutes yelling about all the sins that were going on and everything, and how we should be redeemed, and how staying in line for Broadway tickets was part of the devil's work, and all.
It's like the Westboro Baptist Church effect. Now that's the extreme.
I got another story about them. I'll tell you. I'll skip to that one because the Times Square one was just it was this like everybody's standing there, and I'm here as a Christian pastor, and all I hear around me are people complaining about the Christians and thinking, okay, this is not very effective. Like,
you are giving us a bad name, and you do not represent
right.
what Christian behavior, what Christian life, what this means. Yeah,
I was trying. Like, I eventually started trying to do damage control with the people around me who were like making these comments, and was like, "Yeah, this is rough." And then we started talking. And they're like, "Oh, you're a pastor, huh? We're sorry we said all that stuff." And I was like, "No, you were justified. It was fine."
Yeah, that's tough, man.
But yeah, Westboro Baptist is located in Topeka, Kansas. So our church was about 3.5 miles from Westboro Baptist.
Wow.
And there's this little enclave of nicer homes in Topeka. They're all lawyers. They live in this little nice community, and they had a schedule. So like on Sunday morning, they had like 5 or 6 different churches that they would go picket. And Countryside United Methodist was on the schedule. And it was like they were usually there by the time I pulled in the morning. I would see all the signs, and they stayed there for about an hour and 15 minutes. So they're there kind of into the Sunday school hour.
So you're talking about like people that attended Westboro Baptist Church would actively picket other churches every week.
So I'm not sure Westboro Baptist Church actually meets. I think they just protest. So it's like a church in name. I think
they have a building, but that's just where they like store all their signs or something.
I'm not even sure they have a building. It's like the grandfather was the pastor, and it was all these family members. And if you've heard the story of like the people who got divorced out of the family and tell the whole intricate interweb of it all, it is bizarre.
I do remember that when he passed away, I have never seen so much like unified stuff on back then. It was Facebook was pretty much the only consistent thing, but like everybody was just like, finally.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa.
I mean, the goal what the people in Topeka said, and people in the legal community that I knew it from the church, is that they were trying to incite people to run them in with cars like that
Violence,
happened,
yeah.
that then they could sue and get more money that would then further their cause. So they're out there with kids and the most inflammatory stuff in the
So
world.
it's just constant entrapment.
Yeah.
They're just trying to goad people into doing something illegal to them so they could sue them and win.
Yeah. It's nasty.
Gross.
So anyway, 5-6 times. They're not there every Sunday, but I pass by them, and it just always like I can feel they have all the signs in just the right colors to make your blood boil. I mean, they're really good at what they do. So I'm in there and doing church stuff, and we can't see them. But I remember one time, like 3 months, 4 months into me being there, one of the students says, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we just went out and took them a whole bunch of cookies and stuff, like donuts? Like, what if we were really nice to them? And I was like, no, we're not going to do that. Well, another kid came up and was like, that's a great idea.
Oh.
And they were totally doing it from a sarcastic edge. But finally we're like, well, I mean, we read all these scriptures about loving your enemy. So sure enough, we go gather all these desserts from the church and go out there. Well, the kids immediately run up and take them, and you could see like their parents try and grab them and not take anything. And we just ended up having to leave them there and just said, hey, we hope you enjoy the morning.
Were they engaging with you at all, or were they just ignoring anything you said?
They actually didn't yell at us. So they just flat out ignored us. The kids they're kids. They see donuts. They want them. The kids ran over and got something and started eating, and the parents immediately grabbed them and took them away. And so we just left stuff out there for them, and they were gone in like 20 minutes afterward. But because I expected as we walked up that we would start receiving all of these God hates whatever kind of slurs at us. They literally didn't talk to us. They just stood there, did their thing, and left. But in doing their thing, they were super inflammatory. But yeah, that's what I was really proud of those students, though, of like, even though it was out of a sarcastic edge, it still had that John Foreman of like, well, they can be out here hating us. We're going to go love them in some way and try and turn the tables a little bit.
Yeah. Stuff like that that's one of the harder parts. Fortunately, I have not seen that much of it. Mm-hmm. I've seen a few times where I went to some like public event up in Denton, and then once in Dallas where there was somebody literally on like a box with a bullhorn, just yelling very scripturally inaccurate stuff at people. Keyword at people, not to them.
Not to people at all.
They do not want you to engage with them, as we've somewhat seen in most of these cases. They just want to yell at people. Yeah. And probably incite something.
Right.
Which just seems
very counterintuitive. It's like I read one, and it's like, you know what the only scripture passage I'm ever going to read in my life is when Jesus turns over the tables. And I'm going to go and I'm just going to create a ruckus in the public scene so that everybody knows I'm there and I'm turning over tables in their hearts and minds. And like, Jesus is Jesus. He did it for a reason, but he didn't do it very often.
I struggle with what is the correct thing to do, because different phases of my life I've felt different levels of something should be done about this. Mm-hmm. And I'm at this point now where I'm like, the thing to do is completely ignore it.
Yeah.
Because if and then there's that other part of my brain that's like, okay, so if somebody goes out there, they're on a bullhorn, they're screaming their guts out for like 3 hours, if not a single person even so much as acknowledges that they were there regardless, does that deter that person, or are they so mentally like lunatic that they're just like, I did my thing, and I'm like, ugh.
I think they feel like they did God's will. When the solar eclipse happened, we went out in McKinney. They had by the library. They had this big event.
You were telling me about this.
And there was a dude who, like, during the time of the solar eclipse, he had been like with his family, and he was wearing a shirt that very obviously signified who he was. So we knew, okay, this guy's this kind of person. But during the solar eclipse, whatever minute and a half or something that it lasted, he was on the bullhorn the entire time, basically preparing people to be taken away in the rapture. And you better convert to Jesus now, because in 45 seconds, you're not going to be here, and all this.
It reminds me of that Parks and Rec episode where they were the Church of the Reasonableists thinks that Zorp is going to come down, and they think about twice a year that it's going to happen, and they keep looking at the book and like, oh, we got it wrong. It's this time now, and they have to keep renting the park to do it.
Well, that was the funny part was, so like, we're trying, no one's paying attention to this guy at all. And he's got this little church group around him, and he's very clearly stating, we are all about to leave. Like, I mean, very clearly saying this is the rapture. We're all going.
Yeah, what does a guy like that do afterward?
Well, and then afterward, it's like, it doesn't happen. So he put his bullhorn down and he continued the rest of his day. And I was like, I always wonder, like, was he super disappointed when he went home? Or did he feel like, well, at least I tried? Or
has he lost his faith now that like nothing came to fruition?
I don't know. Because I've known other people who have been into like the end of the world kind of things. And it's usually goes back to like the Parks and Rec of like, oh, we must have got it wrong. Let's try again.
Yeah.
And it's this constant prediction as opposed to like, you know what? Let's just live. Like God is here today.
What was the Mayan one?
That was they had a calendar system that only went so far.
It went to like I think it was like 2012.
Yeah, it was like scarily accurate.
It was like October 2012 or December 2012 or something like that. December. So I don't remember. I'd have to look it up. But I just remember that being a thing that a lot of people were. And then about 3 months before that date, where the Mayan calendar ended, people started to kind of come out of the woodworks. They're like, I've been a Mayan expert my entire life. That's not what this means.
Right.
Like, where were you years ago?
They literally ran out of building materials. They couldn't get that high.
But all right, so I have one last thing I want to bring up.
Since we've gone on many tangents, yeah.
I was going to just save this for like next week, I guess. But I don't know. I'm very curious about this. Explain the phrase "peace that surpasses understanding."
Yeah,
because peace is, to me, like that's in some ways it's a very explainable thing, and it's a very conceptually, it's almost a lack of something.
Yeah.
But the more you think about it, it's like it replaces like anger, frustration, malice, violence, whatever, with harmonious. There's almost like a lack of things, but like. Peace doesn't feel like that complicated of a concept. So what does it mean when it surpasses understanding?
Yeah, I think it's when it comes in times it shouldn't. And that's, the easiest explanation is funerals. Especially for like the family members or the closest family members, like usually a funeral happens about a week after someone's death. And so all week long, they've both been in trauma and shock. And then like doing a funeral is just super hard work. I mean, it's super busy the way we do it, and they're doing a lot of the work. So they're super busy. They're putting their mind, and the funeral is often the place where it's like, I finally get to stop and recognize that I've lost this person. And it's super meaningful and super helpful, but people break down. So here we are in a funeral where people are breaking down. They're recognizing they've lost somebody they deeply love. It doesn't mean that it gets easy on the other side of it, but then but people start laughing and telling jokes, and like the receptions are always the greatest parties because family members haven't seen each other in a year, and it's this really weird thing where people leave funerals feeling uplifted and happy.
I've always said that like I would love to have more of an Irish wake than a traditional funeral. Like I want people just telling a bunch of stories with a beer in their hand.
And and so that kind of brings that piece that like how can we celebrate while we're sad? Peace that surpasses. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
It does not. That's a really good correlation there.
And I
like that.
Like I don't know if you've seen the video. There's a famous video or kind of a viral video that happened after Russia invaded Ukraine. It was several months in, and people were like living in subway tunnels for the bombing. And there was this little girl that got up and started singing "Let It Go." She's just like in full costume, just singing "Let It Go" and all, and like put on this Disney concert. And so in the midst of their country being shelled, they start singing Disney songs and just having a blast together.
That reminds me of in World War II, I believe it was in the Battle of the Bulge, where it was Christmas Eve.
That was World War I.
That was World War I?
Yeah.
Where they started singing Silent
1914.
Night?
Yeah. And it's so, I think that's where peace that surpasses understanding is, when the context when Paul is writing it is like, they're a persecuted group of people. They don't have a home base. They don't have a lot of like promise for the future.
Yeah.
But in the midst of uncertainty, they still find a way to rejoice.
That's good.
Yeah. That's the way I would explain it. Yeah. And I think that's where I find some of the best evidence for a supernatural divine experience is either two things, right? If we're just animalistic and biological and instinctual, then if our kin die, well, that means more food for us, or we just move on and find another one.
Yeah. It's just the complexity that is human emotion.
Yeah.
That we can go from full-blown, this is my enemy, and to creating this sense of even momentary joy, peacefulness. Those are always those moments that we latch onto as humankind, because they do surpass understanding. Like, why would this seemingly beautiful thing happen in the midst of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes to, at least from the white American side of post 9/11, all this unity that came out of tragedy, the things that happen when the Cajun Navy goes in after a hurricane that floods Houston and saves a whole bunch of people, and it's kind of this rejoiceful moment. So I think that's peace that surpasses understanding of like, we should be down on the ground crying in a ball, and yet we're toasting someone with a beer, or we're rejoicing together. And it that's the points to me that, there's something about the image of God inside of us that makes us a little bit more than just instincts.
I can get behind that.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm going to long for then for the rest of my life. Peace that surpasses understanding.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enjoy your hopefully very peaceful day.
Right. Peace.